Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. Ukraine War News Update, third part for the 17th of November 2024. We're going to look at the world of geopolitics surrounding the war in Ukraine, with focus on Ukraine, but obviously everything is connected in the world, and that seems insanely apparently so with each passing week as we find these connections in the spider web of global machinations. Okay. We'll start with actually going back to the strikes this morning on Ukraine. Russia sent 210 aerial pieces of ordnance into Ukraine. 120 missiles, 90 drones. Tim White says, so here's the updated information on Russia's attacks today on Ukrainian society and infrastructure in 16 different regions. Amazingly, though, power has been restored to the country, to most of the country now. So you can see there huge numbers of strikes, or at least attempted strikes. Number of dead, 8. Lots of it injured, and lots of regions and areas affected. Now, power plants did not suffer significant damage, and damaged facilities will be restored in 2 to 3 days, says People's Deputy Nagornyak. The problem is there is a thought that actually they will be doing this night after night, that they might well have stockpiled enough to do this every night for the next however long. If you're going to see these strikes every night, Ukraine is going to be in a lot of trouble, and it wouldn't surprise me because they've been stockpiling for quite a long time. We have not seen cruise missiles be utilized in large numbers for months, and so I expect several months worth of missiles to be used in just a few days. Personally, that's my opinion. We'll see if that turns out. I hope it doesn't. Now, this is Donald Tusk, and no one will stop Putin with phone calls. The attack last night, one of the biggest of this war, proved that telephone diplomacy cannot replace real support from the whole West for Ukraine. The next weeks will be decisive not only for the war itself, but also for our future, said Donald Tusk. And he's absolutely right. That's in the context of Olaf Scholz phoning from Germany almost kind of bilaterally, or sort of unilaterally, really, on his own, saying, right, I'm going to phone Putin, and Ukraine not being too happy with that. And the very next night, there's a massive, well, in fact, that night, there's a massive wave of Russian missiles and drones. So telephone diplomacy doesn't work, says Tusk, and he's got a point there. Right. Police in Bosnia have arrested a Russian suspected of training agents in Moldova to destabilize the country. That is, again, another one of these connections that we are observing on a weekly basis. The Czechs have returned to Russian gas as the cost of alternatives bites, according to Bloomberg. That is a bit of a kick in the teeth for the Ukrainians and people being sort of anti-Russia. A nation has boosted the imports of Russian supplies via Slovakia, and transit deal for flows to Europe via Ukraine is set to expire. So the Czechs possibly, helping out Russia quite a bit there. There is, I think, there's due to be an election soon, and the right wing, very much the right wing, is due to get in power. Am I correct in thinking that? I hope Czechia doesn't go the direction of Hungary and Slovakia. Now, British MPs and peers from all parties have called on the government to back Ukraine's demands for a just peace with the diplomatic pressure and military aid, according to The Guardian. Sir Keir Starmer's government must back Ukraine strongly in the coming months. So as Trump pushes Ukraine to negotiate, Britain's MPs say UK must ensure just terms. Zelensky is aiming to reach a peace deal with Russia next year as his backers signal that they are preparing for talks. I just want to play you this, actually, because this is just delightful. It's a clip from UK Parliament. Now, the context of this is that Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK Party, is a massive supporter of Trump. He was over at a bunch of rallies. He was going to be campaigning for Trump and then decided last minute to run for MP of Clacton, which is a former UKIP constituency. So it's the most likely constituency in the UK that Nigel Farage would win. He then won that as an MP. The reality is Nigel Farage is not the least bit interested in being an MP. He's interested in going on TV, talking about immigration, talking about all the sort of dog whistle issues that he often does. And that's his home. Like, he's your kind of PR man. He's not interested in sorting out potholes in Clacton and running a constituency surgery where people come up and say, look, I'm not really happy. This isn't open. This isn't working. That's not doing this. And he's the guy that's going to sort that out locally in Clacton. That's not Nigel Farage. He's a sort of guy that likes to be seen at a big conference in the US, a big rally, for Donald Trump, and getting the shout out and getting all that applause. That's your Nigel Farage. So he went across to the rally. He also went to the RNC as well, the committee in the conference in the US, when he was sort of just elected, and he got a bit of a reputation for spending more time in the US than in his constituency of Clacton. And anyway, he just turned up. He was just at Prime Minister's Questions, which happens every week. It's a sort of thing. Was it every 2 weeks now? Anyway, they have Prime Minister's Questions, which is, I think, a great British institution where the government gets cross-examined by all the other parliamentarians, all the other parties, and you have a bit of a to-do in the House of Parliament. Good news from my point of view that I'm not a massive fan of the Conservatives, and Kemi Badenoch, who is, or Bad Enoch, reference to Enoch Powell there, has actually just shown herself not to be a very good leader of the Tories. She was terrible at Prime Minister Questions the other day. So it's really interesting that her ratings are now lower than all the other leaders apart from Liz Truss, I think, who was only leading for like 49 days or whatever it was. So I don't know that the Tories are going to be in a particularly strong situation to challenge Labour over the next year or so. I don't know that she's the right choice. Anyway, this is brilliant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the Prime Minister and the whole House would wish to congratulate Donald Trump on his landslide victory last week. Hold on.
And there's a bit of laughing there because it's interesting to get this over to an American audience. Now, I know a lot of you are like big fans of Donald Trump, and you're like, he's going to be the saviour. But actually, quite across the board in the UK politics, particularly in the political elite, I guess, he's held in a somewhat disdain. Certainly on the left, the centre, and even centre-right, like the Conservatives will be split as to whether they think that right-wing populism is the way to go. So he's had a bit of support from, say, Boris Johnson, but generally not. But anyway, this is just delightful.
I will hear the question. Nigel.
Thank you. But within a couple of days, we'd learned of a third assassination attempt. Charges have been laid, and behind it are Iran's Revolutionary Guards. Has the time not come, Prime Minister, to prescribe what is so obviously a terrorist organisation, and in doing so, not just do the right thing, but maybe mend some fences between this government and the incoming presidency of Donald Trump's, given that the whole of his cabinet have been so rude about him over the last few years?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to see the honourable member making a rare appearance back here in Britain. He spent so much time in America recently. I was half expecting to see him on the immigration statistics when we see the next batch. But he may have missed. I did congratulate the incoming president last week. And we will work with him. The point he makes about Iran is a very serious point, and we will work across the House and with our allies on it. Obviously, on question of prescription, we keep them under review. Thank you.
Just a good bit of joshing there in the House of Parliament. Anyway, Nigel Farage, somewhat of a supporter of Russia, comparatively speaking. It's, I think, fascinating that the war in Ukraine and Russian activities throughout the globe are there. They are evident. It's obvious to me that Russia are the bad guys, and that, you know, we can derive that conclusion from the war in Ukraine, but also from their activities in trying to interfere with elections from Brexit 2016 and US elections 2016 to 2020 to 2024. And we see their impact on social media that is very overt. but also stuff like this. So a Russian spy ship has been escorted away from an area with critical cabling in the Irish Sea. Yantar intelligence ship was seen operating drones in an area containing subsea energy and internet structure. We got bloody Russian spy ships piddling about our seas. They are just a huge threat to us. It frustrates the crap out of me that the US seems to be hell-bent on getting someone like Tulsi Gabbard, who is a Assad and Putin shill, in as National Intelligence Director. Again, it still blows my mind. So the Hill here saying, Senate must protect our intelligence community from Assad ally Tulsi Gabbard. And I would say Russia ally. Russia have these ships floating around the UK, clearly up to no good. Ugh. Anyway, Anton Geraschenko passes his judgment on what's going on in Abkhazia. So that's the quasi-autonomous region of Georgia that the Russians have essentially sort of annexed, if you like. The situation in Abkhazia is developing swiftly. The struggle between the current president Bzania and the opposition demanding he relinquish power is intensifying. A lot of information appears that is hard to verify. Russian media report that Bzania fled to Sukhumi fled from there. That's the capital of Abkhazia, if you like, for his native village of Tamash, 40 kilometers from the capital. According to the Russian media, the 2 helicopters sent for Bzania from Russia returned to Sochi without him. The opposition is occupying government buildings in the capital, Sukhumi. Local Telegram channels report they have established a coordination headquarters to maintain key government services in the president's absence. They are currently meeting with the locals in the building of the presidential administration and called for citizens to gather in the main hall. Reportedly, the opposition has seized the weapons from police armories. Military units are reinforcing security around weapons depots, while the special services are biding their time and do not back either the president or the opposition. Opposition leader Levan Mika has warned that the parliament may vote on Bzania's removal. A 2/3 majority is required for impeachment. Pictured in the video below is Bzania arriving for a meeting with local residents in Tamish. He announced that he is ready to set a new election if the opposition leaves the government buildings. Russia media report. Ukrainian expert on Russian affairs Vadim Denisenko thinks that the current events might be connected to Putin's former aide Surkov. He stands to lose the most from the investment agreement and his ties to the opposition. Surkov may use the situation to his advantage to return to the Kremlin in exchange for a swift resolution in the Abkhaz political crisis. The situation remains highly unstable, with further developments expected throughout the afternoon. So I don't know the latest on that, but I don't think that either the opposition or the pro-Russian government are anti-Russian. So the opposition are pro-Russian as well. It's just that they recognise that the new agreement that has been done with the Russian government sells their land away to Russia and reduces their autonomy. So I guess the opposition wants to remain pro-Russian but anti, I guess, completely capitulating to Russian power. So it's not quite that this is all definitely in favour of, say, Georgia, the Georgian population who are anti-Russian. It's not that it's favouring Ukraine, definitely, but it's certainly an upset in the region that will keep the Russians, I think, somewhat distracted. Right, this is a translation from Dr. Anna Odesitka that Osint Yuri Kakashi has translated. This is has posted. This is looking at Russia being in danger of collapsing and whether the US can or stop it or not. So Putin once dreamed of restoring Russian glory after the fall of the USSR, the same way Hitler dreamed of restoring German glory after World War I. It is the only thing behind power and wealth that Putin wanted after the fall of the Soviet Empire, but to achieve this, he must have Ukraine. This is a true fact. You can't create a sustainable Eurasian empire without Ukraine, without us. He first tried achieving this by a slow invasion of Ukraine, which escalated incrementally over the years in proportion to his age as he grew older and time was running out. 2004 2024 was his first attempt at taking over Ukraine, but he wrongly believed that Ukraine would fold like Belarus did. He thought that the Ukrainian people would all show up to peacefully protest Russian occupation, and then, after seeing the Russian military in our streets, would get scared, return home, and accept that we are all now Russians. He so believed this that the Russian troops who invaded in 2012 brought their ceremonial parade uniforms. That's 2022, sorry. Brought their ceremonial parade uniforms with them for the big celebration in Kiev. But that did not happen, did it? Afraid of losing power inside Russia, Putin only sends ethnic minorities and prisoners to fight for his empire. He knows that if he activated a full draft, white Slavic Aryan Russians would protest and rise up. So, as the war dragged on, he eventually had no choice but to begin relying on foreign aid to keep him and his military alive. And increasingly, Putin was forced to transform Russia's entire society and industry into a war-based society and economy, a war machine. His actions, however, created the lack of all other resources needed for society. You can't eat bullets or buy bread with guns you assemble in a factory. Therefore, he needs to declare victory as soon as possible, and the only way to do that is to walk away with some land. But he can't, because we, the Ukrainian people, won't let him. Then he made the worst possible miscalculation of all. He stole our children. Anyone who, in a world who has children, knows that nothing will stop a parent from finding their child or children. Not the fear of death, and not missiles, nothing. Knowing all this background, we can now look at the larger question of Putin's alliance and reliance on China. The Chinese walk a very thin line. That one side helps their own goal of a slow and warless invasion and occupation of Russia and alienating the West. That on one side believes that. They need and want both. However, it forced at gun to choose one over the other, they will choose the West, if forced at gun. Meaning the US and the EU have an advantage if they seriously want to deter China from further involving itself with the Russia-Ukraine war. Because Putin is so focused on Ukraine, which has become his own Moby Dick to the exclusion of all else, he has made decisions that have started a chain reaction of Russia's collapse. This is something both my president, Zelensky, and my father have both said. We need to resist as long as possible and let time take its course in Russia. To get Xi to support him and to evade international sanctions, Putin gave away Siberian oil, gas and natural resources, and China will never give them back. Xi whispered to Putin's ear that he can get troops, ammunition, artillery and missiles from North Korea to help him slay the Great White Whale. However, because Putin is so desperate and focused on Ukraine, he does not see that Korean troops beholden to Kim, who is beholden to China, and likely Chinese troops are now on Russian soil. And while some will be sent to fight against us, most are there to guard Chinese Siberia and China's resources, is what she claims. Putin has no defense against a weakening of Russia. He imagined that as soon as he occupied Ukraine, he would remove the Chinese presence and begin working on restoring the economy and military. He can't. The election of Trump in America appears to provide Putin help in enforcing Ukraine to be Russian. And while Trump now seems happy to go along with Putin's plan, he absolutely hates Russia's Iranian, Palestinian and Chinese allies. So Putin likely assured Xi that he can control Trump, but he can't, at least not fully. Why? Because, put simply, by nature, Trump is Trump, and that's who Trump is. And if there are only a few things that he believes deeply, is that Muslims and China are more dangerous to America than Russia. My father sees it playing out like this. Trump tries to force Ukraine to surrender, which won't work. He will cut aid, which will only create a desperate situation in which Ukraine, all of Europe, Australia, Canada, Japan, Taiwan and South Korea will move towards a massive arms race and the introduction of a hybrid war inside of Russia and even China. China will panic at the instability of a guerrilla war within their borders, and Russia will again threaten nukes that nobody takes seriously because we all know it's a bluff. Putin will put pressure on Trump to demand we surrender, but he can't make us. Trump will impose tariffs on China, which will have nothing to do with Ukraine. China will employ active measures to remove Trump, and Russia will have to support them, still unable to win at genocide in Ukraine and increasing guerrilla war inside Russia, running out of money, running out of people. Trump not delivering, Russian society starving, while China takes away Russian land and resources piece by piece, having to still supply and fund Assad, the Iran regime, Maduro, Hamas, Cuba, Africa, Kim. It all collapses. Therefore, the longer we fight, the more we will ensure Russia's collapse. And while this may scare the Americans, the rest of the entire free planet no longer cares what America says. Interesting. And of course, I'm not saying all of this is true, or all of it will happen, but certainly some interesting ideas here that actually time is something that could be on the... I don't think time is on the Ukraine side. I think they are paper thin on those front lines, but then how much do Russia really have in reserve, and what's their economy looking like? And the longer this goes on, the more things get complicated with regard to Iran, China, North Korea, Hamas, Israel. All of the world is connected in this web I keep talking about. But interesting from this source. Russia, she concludes, will be a collection of Chinese and American-owned provinces fighting each other over resources. Europe will be free, and my father adds that this chain reaction is already started and can't be stopped because my leadership, like my father, knows history and how Russia collapsed twice before in the last century. Only this time we won't let the West imagine it can teach democracy to this failed people, Russia. This time we isolate them and let China and America fight over their resources. And that is coming from Anna Odesitka, who is Odessa born and raised, studied in Kharkiv and London. I'm not sure exactly who she is other than that, but some interesting points being made there. Now, on a similar kind of level, here, Francois Hollande, the former president of France, believes that Donald Trump is preparing the capitulation of Ukraine. So I know there's a lot of you out there, Republicans, who still think Trump is the right decision, that he will be good for Ukraine. And it might well be that ends up that is the best decision. Like Trump being in charge might weirdly benefit Ukraine, but it won't be through Trump's intentions. It will be through some activity of some actions of Putin that will backfire or something like that. If this was to go the way that Trump, JD Vance and all the people around him want Ukraine to go, Ukraine will be shafted. No doubt about that in my mind. And this is kind of what Hollande is saying. So again, it's worth understanding that the rest of the world, you may be a super Trump fan and Republican who thinks, yep, okay, it's better than whatever else was going to be, the Harris administration, etc., etc. But actually, a lot of the rest of the world, in terms of democratic leadership, really doesn't think that. Emmanuel Macron, so he called his successor, Emmanuel Macron, to take a strong initiative with the German government, which will be elected in February. So in other words, you've got this relationship of France and Germany, which is pretty fractious at the best of times, I guess, anyway. So there are lots of challenges there. And you have this 4D chess game going on within the EU with those major powers. Then you've got Italy to throw in as well. And then you've got the Eastern Bloc countries now, Poland being incredibly important, Hungary doing what they're doing, Slovakia doing what they're doing. And then you've got the Nordic nations going, hello, we need to wake up, and the Baltics going. So there's all sorts of stuff going on within Europe. But here we've got a call for Emmanuel Macron to take a strong initiative with the German government to make sure that Ukraine is properly supported, because it's not looking great from the US point of view that he's saying that Trump is playing for Ukrainian capitulation, which I don't think there's any indication that it's otherwise. Trump has never blamed Putin. Trump has never blamed Russia overtly and called Putin out. He's always said, well, we need it to stop and force a negotiation, which will be to the benefit of Russia. So US President Biden has met with Xi Jinping as we move on to more American-based events and news. Biden's met with Xi Jinping and expressed concern over China's support for Russia's military-industrial complex. He also condemned the deployment of North Korean troops in Russia. Now, had the Democrats been continuing the administration on past January this next year, this would be important. But Biden's a lame duck, and Xi Jinping's probably just thinking, whatever, mate, don't really give a toss. And that is a real shame, because actually China need to be held responsible for aiding Russia in a war overtly. Not just in terms of North Korean troops. Obviously, that's North Korea, not China. But the fact that there are supposedly Chinese drone factories that are making drones exclusively for Russia, that is not good. So the Biden administration is considering adding Russia's Gazprombank to its sanctions list. As the third largest bank in Russia, it plays a key role in gas settlements between Russia and Europe. The move, expected by the end of November, would prohibit Gazprom from any transactions with American banks. Now, that could be really good news. I hope that they just do a bunch of really strong things, the Biden administration, in their lame ducks period, where they hammer sanctions on Russia and the new administration take over. Now, their initial instinct is to reverse anything that Biden does, because that's what Trump did in 2016 for Obama. He just wanted to reverse everything. And he would have reversed Obamacare had he actually had a plan that made any sense to do so. But there was no alternative, and they never came up with an alternative. Now he's got much more dangerous people in place that they are just going to upturn everything that the Biden administration has done. Even if it's really good things, they're just going to do that anyway. And if they turn over sanctions, like I keep saying, that is game over for Ukraine. As Russia is getting hammered by sanctions, there's no doubt about it. Their economy is in a lot of trouble. Now, if the Biden administration can put things in place that can't be overturned easily, that's fantastic. And let's hope that they can. But I do worry that Trump would just come in and reverse these decisions. The US will partner with Ukraine to transition Ukraine's coal-fired plants to small modular nuclear reactors and to use them to help decarbonize its steel industry. The country's announced on November the 16th at COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan. So we've had the climate change COP29 conference in Azerbaijan, and it looks like that would be good news if you can get nuclear reactors working in Ukraine to replace the older coal-fired power stations. Then it might also ring-fence the energy infrastructure from being struck by missiles, because you would hope that Russia won't be aiming for nuclear power reactors. The former Ukraine's former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dmytro Kuleba, wrote in The Economist that the re-election of Donald Trump in the US and Russia's war against Ukraine can only intensify. Sorry, a bit of butchering of English there. He claims that all three leaders, Trump, Putin and Zelensky, cannot afford to appear weak. Suggesting that de-escalation is unlikely in the near term. Kuleba noted that the current US strategy is failing not because it is fundamentally flawed, but rather because it was never fully implemented. Half measures and half resolve have led to half results. Now, it sounds like me and Dmytro would get on well, because this is exactly my position. My position is the morality and politics of the Biden administration is correct, but they did things half-assed, half-heartedly, because they're afraid of escalation. And that led to them drip feeding stuff that has meant that this war has been protracted in a way that it shouldn't necessarily have been. But the Trump administration is a worse option still. It might end up being better, but not through the will of Trump. It'll be from other variables, making it such that Trump is forced to support Ukraine rather than opting to support Ukraine. If he wanted to support Ukraine, he would outright support Ukraine right now and not talk about forcing a peace on both sides. But he's not. He's doing the whole both sides thing. So he's not interested in Ukraine prevailing. He's never once talked about Ukraine winning, ever. So you can fool yourself with whatever version of Trump you think exists, but it's not true if it is anything other than what I'm kind of setting out here. That's my opinion, and I'll stick with it. And I think Dmytro Kuleba's got it right, which is that actually all three of these people, Trump, Putin and Zelensky, will not step down. These are all strong leaders in their own way, strong personalities. And the idea that Trump's going to come on and go, right, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, and those two are going to capitulate to Trump, go, okay, yeah, whatever you say, matey, is clearly not going to happen. Quote, the war will end only when Mr. Putin accepts Ukraine's right to exist as an independent and democratic Western power. Of course, that's never going to happen. Putin views subjugating Ukraine as a core part of his legacy. Any failure to do so would mark him as the first Russian Tsar who fell short. That is to say, a loser. So I don't know that, well, as Kuleba says here, you could get an intensification of the war rather than actually it de-escalating because of the nature of those three leaders. Now, behind this, and honestly, if I met Elon Musk right now, and my walking is the worst it's ever been. I just walked out for lunch, came back for lunch, and my walking is the worst it's ever been because my primary progressive multiple sclerosis is not going well at the moment. But I would still jump Elon Musk and I would punch the living crap out of him, because if there's a man I despise more than Putin at the moment, it's Elon Musk. And here's a good example why. So Zelensky has just been on radio giving an interview where he talks about the US not being able to force us to sit and listen at the negotiation table. We can't be forced to do so. We're an independent country. And Elon Musk his sense of humour is amazing, laughy face emoji. And I really, really, really hate when you take the piss out of someone who's fought for 2.5 years for the existence of his own country in a very brave and courageous way, politically and physically, staying in a country, not evacuating himself, not being taken out by the US by helicopter, saying, no, I'm here to fight. I want a taxi, I want bloody weapons, right? And you take the piss out of that man, you are dirt. Elon Musk is dirt. He is just a bad human being. And I've got at least 3 people I know now who've been sucked in by Elon Musk and now become Elon Musk cult. Like, I've got a friend of mine who I don't know how to deal with it because he's so supportive of Elon Musk that his moral evaluations have just completely, they're so different to mine now. We're just like, I don't know how you, and it started with Jordan Peterson, and I warned him, I said, you are going to go down this route, and by starting here, you will end up here. And 100% he started there and ended up there. I'm like, you have done what I predicted. You are where I said you'd be. And there's nothing I can agree with you about your whole political worldview anymore. And Elon Musk and your absolute love for Elon Musk has twisted your interpretation of the world. And just the fact that 2.5 years ago, my mate was like, these are the best videos. He was full on pro-Ukraine, absolutely like heralding all the work I was doing, sharing my videos and everything. And he's got quieter and quieter and quieter. And I'd love to know what his views are on Ukraine now. Because he sent a congratulatory tweet to Elon Musk saying, well done for getting your, as if Elon Musk gives a toss, right? But it's almost obsequious, kind of like, congratulations for getting to the position of Doge, right? Department of Government Efficiency. And you're like, you're just adulating this person who is taking a mickey out of someone who's done far more stuff of great moral and political integrity than Elon Musk would ever be able to do in his entire life. And anyway, so this Elon Musk tweet has got people going nuts. Like Anton Gerashchenko, the things I don't want to comment on. In a few days, it will be 1,000 days of the full-scale war and Ukrainian resistance. We are living through so much grief and unbearable circumstances. Our true friends and allies are with us. Thank you. We see you and appreciate you. And he posts this Elon Musk thing, which is just like, I can't even comment on this. It just sickens me. And this is a guy at the heart of the American administration. Like, absolutely at the center of power in the White House. Oliver Alexander here, who is deep state analyst, biolab interior decorator. It's like Oliver Alexander has cast his opinions on an awful lot of stuff, and I refer to him quite a lot. Elon completely dismissing Ukrainian agency. The US can't force Ukraine to do anything. They can make the situation for Ukraine significantly harder, but at the end of the day, it is Ukraine's decision. And this source saying Elon Musk ridicules Zelensky for saying the US can't force Ukraine to the negotiating table. You notice Musk doesn't claim to be able to make Putin do anything. Standing up to Zelensky, how brave. And this is what gets my goat, is that all the time these people are taking the mick, really just ridiculing, absolutely, ridiculing Zelensky and not giving any hassle to the indicted war criminal, Vladimir Putin. So Putin gets away with invading, stealing children, killing civilians, sending a wave of 210 aerial aerial weapons, aerial ordnance into Ukraine last night to destroy their energy infrastructure. And no, let's take the piss out of Zelensky. Let's choose the victim here and let's ridicule them. That is disgusting to me. There's no two ways about it. And if you are a fan of Elon Musk still, then you are morally compromised. There is no way about it, no two ways. Now, I keep thinking about this. Like, we teach our children, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. And then apparently we we have a completely different way of morally evaluating humans when they get to adulthood. So if you're a fan of Trump and Elon Musk, you go, oh no, it is fine to take the mickey out of disabled people. Oh no, it is fine to take the mickey out of the victim here in a genocidal invasion. Oh no, it is fine to do this. No, but children, you know, you should never do that. You should never lie. You should never do this. You should never do that. You know, but when you become a politician, oh, I really like it when you do all of those things I've told you never to do. How are we morally evaluating reality these days? Like, what is going on? Like, the stuff that these guys are doing and getting celebrated for doing, right, by their cultish followers, is the stuff we tell our children never to do. Don't do that. Oh, well done. You've done that. Brilliant. I'm going to vote for you. Don't do that, little Jimmy, because that makes you a horrible person. But didn't Donald Trump just do that? Yeah, I bloody love him for it. Great guy. I voted for him. But don't you do that. I don't understand you, Daddy. No, it's because I make no sense. I live in a world of double standards. Sorry about that. You'll understand it when you get older and join Twitter and become a horrible person. So now we know that Twitter has indeed been hard-coded in with, and I talked about this previously, with bias for, in the American election for the Republican Party. Now, why I'm bringing this up again is so I went through this yesterday and I talked about how the coding appears to have changed on July the 13th when Elon Musk himself and pro-Trump accounts were amplified even more. So it was a coding change. And remember, this was a guy that said Twitter needs to be politically neutral. He literally said that and then promptly unneutralized it or whatever. Anyway, it's the Anne Applebaum says it looks like he has made that threat in Brazil. So she says, what's to stop Musk doing the same with Twitter in other countries? In other words, a platform like this, which I'm trying to get off, as you can see, I'm on Blue Sky as much as I can be. A platform like Twitter has not only been used to help elect Donald Trump, and I think it played a massively important part. I think the media ecosystem was largely responsible for that, and I could bore you with all my rationale for that. But it looks like he's made the same threat in Brazil and Canada as well. So look, Elon Musk, we need your help in Canada getting rid of Trudeau. Elon Musk says he will be gone in the upcoming election. This single most powerful human being on earth having the impact on what should be free and fair elections is incredibly disturbing. Disinformation distorts reality, and he is the guru of disinformation. What is my hope, and a lot of people are saying this, is that Trump is too big a personality to have someone like Elon Musk pulling the strings for too long. And at some stage, he's just going to say, actually, like he's done for so many people previously, you look at the turnover in his 2016 to 2020 administration, huge turnover. You are likely to see this with Elon Musk. Certain people, Anthony Scaramucci talks about this from personal experience. So Trump completely humiliates Elon Musk in front of House Republicans. Elon Musk joined Trump on Capitol Hill for a meeting with Republicans, and the president-elect used the opportunity to ridicule the richest man in the world. Now, whether this really did work to annoy Trump, is whether this was just a little sort of joke, I don't know. Donald Trump is wasting no time making a punchline out of some of his key allies, including Elon Musk. During his first meeting with the Republican lawmakers on the Hill as president-elect, Trump asserted that his power over Musk, mocking the tech billionaire for sticking around for so long. Quote, Elon won't go home. I can't get rid of him, Trump said Wednesday, until I don't like him. The world's richest man has reportedly spent, quote, nearly every single day of the last week at Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, according to CNN. Musk has been spotted golfing with the president-elect, dining with him and his wife Melania, and even been in the room while Trump phones world leaders, hopping on calls with Ukrainian President Zelensky and Turkish President Erdogan. And MSNBC's Lawrence O'Donnell argued that Trump's comments about Musk were an assertion of his dominance, played before a room that has to play along. Quote, everyone laughed, they laughed that uncomfortable laugh, but they laughed when Donald Trump makes a joke about someone on his team, a joke that everyone knows is true, a joke that paints that person as pathetic, as Donald Trump's personal sense of superiority demands that he do. O'Donnell also suggested that Musk's new role in the government, co-leading a new agency, the Department of Government Efficiency, otherwise known as DOGE, is basically a joke in itself, with Musk's responsibilities being tantamount to a fake job with little more power than that of lobbyist on K Street. I don't know. Remains to be seen whether that will be a toothless position or not. I doubt it. Musk will be the likely benefactor of his extended stay with his president-elect, whose opinion is famously swayed by whomever he has last interacted with. But according to tech journalist Kara Swisher, the relationship between the two self-imagined strongmen is destined to flame out. Now, and it goes on to talk about the relationship and whatnot. This is a really interesting point because, and this pertains to Ukraine very directly, the idea that his opinion is swayed by whoever he last spoke to is empirically true as far as I can work out. So his opinion on Ukraine, Trump's opinion on Ukraine, has been informed by everyone around him. Then he had that meeting with Zelensky, remember? And he came out saying, I've learned loads of things about Ukraine. And actually, he tempered his opinions and he changed his opinions, having just spoken to Zelensky, and then went away and then reverted back to all these terrible opinions about Ukraine because that's who he's around. So he just regurgitates whoever he is informing him. The problem is right now, we have a massive problem. So this is Trump at the UFC, so Ultimate Fighting Championships. Everyone around him is pro-Russian. So his sons, RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, they're all meeting Elon Musk. These are all pro-Russian. Kid Rock, probably. Only Mike Johnson has the actual correct view of Ukraine to some degree, based on what he's actually said. However, Mike Johnson will toe the party line. He has said, for example, that Matt Gaetz should be allowed to be AG for, like, where's his Christian sense of morality, right? Where's the moral majority of the old Republican Party? Like, someone who is a Christian nationalist like Mike Johnson, in a slightly looser form of the term, not as extreme as we have seen with people like Peter Hegseth, but with Mike Johnson, you're thinking, well, you go to church, you proclaim to be this, traditional family values, and yet you're saying that Matt Gaetz is the right person for AG. Okay, or that Trump's pick should be honoured. So anyway, I think my point there is Mike Johnson must do whatever Trump tells him to do. Now, if Trump's doing whatever Trump will tell Mike Johnson whatever these people around him will say. So Elon Musk, RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, Donald Trump Jr. and his other Trump, they are just regurgitating, they are spewing their already disinformed opinions of Russia and Ukraine onto Trump. And that will be his latest opinion. And so it's going to be, I think, highly unlikely that Trump is ever going to be supportive of Ukraine unless he surrounds himself with people who are supportive of Ukraine. He just won't be. Now, Edward Hunt Christie here says, NBC claims that Trump's team has compiled a list of current and former US military officers for possible courts martial. So when and I'm including this in the geopolitics to do with the Ukraine war because there is a possibility that the DOD in the US, with Pete Hegseth as a Christian nationalist who wants to get rid of all these kind of what he thinks is supposedly woke generals, etc., and a list being drawn up. So the claim here is there's a list of US military officers that will be ready for courts martial. All of the officers were involved in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. Seems petty and dishonest. Trump set the withdrawal in motion. So if you go and look at the Doha agreement, part of the reason, or a large part of the reason why Doha was that the Afghanistan withdrawal was such an absolute fustercluck was, and thanks to whoever told me that that's the way I should say that, go and read the Doha agreement, you'll understand that actually the Biden administration's arms were somewhat tied. I think they still did a bad job, but it was essentially the Doha agreement that Trump put in place that ruined Afghanistan. Anyway, It may be that Afghanistan is the one issue everyone in the Trump team could agree on as a plausible vehicle and narrative to carry out the real goal, which is create a chilling effect within the ranks, making it clear that the White House can initiate punishment and humiliation. If you want to get a sense of a country moving towards authoritarian, autocratic rule, then you are seeing it being played out before Trump even gets in. When you've got lists of people in the military who are going to be purged on ideological bases, under the pretense of Afghanistan, then you will get a chaos in the DoD. Now, why this is important? It's important for US politics, I think, in general, and I would like to talk about that anyway. But with regard to Ukraine, if you have a dysfunctional DoD that is is full of people fighting for their own preservation, then you're going to have a pretty dysfunctional DoD that's going to be largely distracted from doing what it should be doing, which is supporting the US national security interests, such as supporting Ukraine. I'm deeply, deeply concerned about the state of affairs for the US at the moment. And I think the eye is going to be taken off the ball. And I think this could be a period of time over the next 6 months where the rest of the world who don't want to be, the rest of the world that like China and Russia, and BRICS, I think this could be a period of celebration for them when they're going to take advantage of the US's distraction. This is JV Last. His opinion from the Bulwark with Bill Kristol, both sort of former Republicans concerned with the state of affairs.
And then we'll zoom in on the trees. My view of this is that Trump believes there are two roadblocks to him having full and unbridled executive control of the country and to eventually running for office again. One of those blocks is the Republican Senate. And so he needs to break them so that they no longer even operate under the illusion that they might oppose him, right? Because that's like the strategic ambiguity is Republicans telling themselves that they could, we might defend our prerogatives, right? He wants to make it clear to them and to everybody that they won't. And so that's why he made the demand of the people running for majority leader that they agree with recess appointments and got them to agree prospectively to it. That's why he's nominating people who are so manifestly unfit, right, and dangerous, because it's like a loyalty test.
Yeah, it's like the mafia, right? This is another.
It's like the mafia,
test.
right?
Yeah.
This is another loyalty test. But the other is the last one then is the Supreme Court. And this is why I am utterly convinced that we are going to very soon find ourselves in a place where he is forcing an issue before the Supreme Court, where he's going to dare them to rule against him, with the fear for them being that, like, well, what if we rule against him and he doesn't do it? Now, this is something Elon Musk has done very successfully with the SEC. If you followed Musk's career over and over, like the SEC says, like, Elon, you can't do that. And then he does it. And he has clearly broken the letter of the law. This happened like with his market manipulation with Twitter, right? Where he was tweeting things to manipulate markets. And then, they would get him to agree that he wouldn't do it again in a written agreement. And then he would just do it again anyway. The idea was to make the SEC realize that they did not have the appetite to do what would be required to break him. And so they were broken instead. And that, I think, is going to be the exact same dynamic with regards to the Supreme Court, right? And so, John Roberts is going to be sitting there thinking, my God, what if we rule against him and he refuses to comply? And then the entire court is broken as an institution, right? Then you are at a moment of constitutional crisis because we can't enforce our ruling. And so he's going to bend over backwards to try to not rule against Trump, which will, again, like with the Senate, will have the same effect, right? It's,
Right. I mean, that's dark, and that one's probably a little further off than the moment of truth for the Senate, which is the next 2 months, obviously. But incidentally, I wonder if birthright citizenship is the thing they're teeing up to.
So it's all very worrying because actually you can see these bricks being put in place to build a foundation of inoculation from checks and balances. So he's already got immunity while president. The Supreme Court that ruled in his favour, they're 6-3 in his favour anyway. And this is the idea that actually they're unlikely to rule against him in anything because what can they do? It's likely that they'll just assent to anything Trump wants, rather like the Senate might well do that. So you can think, well, the Senate aren't going to vote this person through and that person through. It's just very, very worrying. And it's all, last thing I'm going to do, and this isn't particularly, so how does this pertain to Ukraine? What I'm worried about is that you have the US, worst case scenario, you've got the US going down an autocratic route here, but so much chaos will be taking place within the political scene there. You have the media go nuts, you'll have the Democrats go nuts, you'll have all sorts of things happening, and Ukraine will be left on the side here. And the US will not be assisting Ukraine or not be high on the agenda. I think there's going to be an awful lot of domestic shenanigans taking place in the US at the expense of Ukraine. And what annoys me is double standards that takes place. But like people, as soon as your guy comes into power, it's like, oh, it's okay for you to do that now. When they were in power, I hated it. But now you're in power and you're doing the similar sort of thing. I love it. I hate these double standards. And I'm just going to leave you this. This isn't to do with the Ukraine war, but I think this is a perfect example of political double standards that you see from the media.
16 years ago, another incoming administration made health and food a key policy priority. Oh, and the right absolutely lost their mind about it.
Tonight, your America is turning into a nanny state thanks to the Obama administration's efforts to rein in the junk food industry. I like junk food. I like McDonald's. I like Wendy's. I like Burger King. I love Kentucky Fried Chicken. I love Ruth's Chris, my favorite steakhouse. Leave my salt and my McDonald's alone.
Come and pry it from my cold, dead hands. Now, a lot of those same people are suddenly, I don't know why, but all of a sudden taking those exact same ideas seriously now that they're coming from RFK Jr.
I love RFK Jr. in this position because, Greg, we should be the healthiest country in the world, but we're the sickest country in the world.
RFK Jr., to his credit, is the right person to lead this effort at HHS. Now, can America do better on issues like obesity and heart disease and strokes and diabetes?
That's the exact same Sean Hannity was saying, keep your fingers off my fast food and salt and this and that. If I want to eat that, I can. Now he's saying, well, we're obese and we need help. Our junk food industry, RFK is the right guy.
Can we get rid of chemicals and hormones in our food like Europe? You know, it is time.
We want regulation like Europe. I agree with this, by the way. I agree. You should have regulation like Europe. EU's got very good food regulation compared to the US. Would you have been saying this bloody 5 weeks ago? No, you wouldn't.
To make America healthy again through accountability and through transparency.
And through regulation.
Hannity is now on the let's regulate food the way the Europeans do train. Okay? Now that Trump ally RFK says junk food and obesity are a problem, I guess it has the thrill of dissident knowledge pushing against the system and the liberal elites. But of course, and here's the rub, really, along with some of these totally correct critiques of the status quo, the anti-system coalition that Trump has built is also full of ludicrous, delusional, dangerous ideas.
So then it goes on to talk about like the crazy views that RFK has on other things. He gets some things right, like some food regulations, pesticides, stuff like that. And then wanting to stop drug research for 8 years and infectious disease research rate, nuts. But the point is there's double standards going on, and we need to make sure that when we are thinking all the time, we are thinking as critically as possible, and we need to be critical of ideas and not just think, well, that person said that and I like that person, so whatever that person says is right just by default of that person saying it. If you're a fan of Musk and you're a fan of Musk from like 5 years ago, it doesn't mean that what he says now is correct. And a decent, nuanced person should be able to say, that's problematic. And if you're a person that was slagging off Tulsi Gabbard for being pro-Putin and pro-Assad 3 years ago and wondering who the hell paid for her meeting with Bashar al-Assad in Syria, who paid for that? No one knows. Right? Should we know about that? Yes, we probably should. Now, if you're rightfully critical of her when she was a Democrat, then you should bloody well be critical of her now she's a Republican. And now she's likely in charge of the national intelligence. So let's just make sure that we are thinking critically through this. And just be very wary of some of these people that Trump has chosen. And just ask yourself, is the US looking like it's going to go down a kind of purge everyone that's going to be critical of me kind of autocratic route that looks very much like what someone who wanted to be a dictator would do? I'm worried. I don't know if you are as well. Take care, guys. Speak soon.